Welcome to another Online Personals Watch C-level interview. We have the CMO of Badu in this interview, Jessica Powell. Welcome to the interview.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for taking the time. So I wanted to ask you, the background on Badu. Friendster, back in 2003 and 2004, had its thunder stolen by MySpace, and then Facebook retired MySpace. But Badu is distinct. I can't see Badu retiring Facebook, but how is it different? How is it distinct from what Facebook does?
Sure. Facebook is for your existing friends, right? You're sharing information, posting photos with people that you already know. And Badu was very much designed to be all about sharing information, meeting new people. So it's people you don't know, which is actually a much larger space than the people you do know. So we actually don't see ourselves as competing directly with Facebook at all. It's a very, very distinct space.
Now, Facebook has said in the past that we are not dating. They've actually come out with that statement. Badu, has that changed over time? Is Badu dating, or is it not? Or is it something else? Friends making, perhaps?
I think it's all of those things. We talk about ourselves as being a platform for meeting new people. And when you think about why people would meet new people or want to meet new people, I think the first use case that everyone would think of course, be dating. So it very much exists on the site, and we do our best to make that happen along with the other sort of use cases that we see. But we don't view ourselves as a strictly dating site. We think that the fact that we provide lots of flexibility in terms of how people use the site and aren't prescriptive in terms of what you have to do or why you need to be on the site has contributed to the success, in fact.
Now, is it more flirting? There's something fun about flirting. I've heard flirting is described as making other people feel good by giving them compliments. If I look at the homepage now, chat, flirt, there's no mention of dating. I think dating and singles are words which you've avoided, quite rightfully so. So, is the active word flirting really with Badu?
I actually see, and it's funny you say that because I think some of those pages are probably just a bit out of date. I have no problem saying that people can date on Badu. They can, and they should if that's what they want to use it for. You can equally flirt, but I think dating is sort of a nice concrete thing where people immediately understand what that is. What we tend to see on the site, the top reasons people go on to Badu and what they use it for is for chat and for making friends. And that constitutes about 70% of the activity on the site. And then you get further down the curve into kind of let's call them the romance scenarios, which could be everything from casual dating all the way down to marriage. And as a group, that's about 30%. So we think the idea and really what Badu should be about is trying to mirror real life. So you go into a bar or cafe, and maybe you're single, but depending on the time of day or where you are kind of in your life, you may or may not be wanting to meet someone. So we're going to throw you together with a whole bunch of different people, and some people you may chat with, and it may never be anything more than that. Other people you may have a bit of flirting going on, and some other people you may date. And in other cases, it may be entirely friendship. In fact, that's one of the biggest use cases we see, and we actually have seen that over 50% of people have added someone that they've met on Badu to their Facebook. So crossing over from the meeting new people into your existing friend space.
The fellow who started Friendster, Jonathan Abrams, back in 2002, he was on a number of dating sites, and he thought internet dating was, quote, cheesy. And so one of the things he endeavored to do was make Friendster a more natural way for people to meet. And essentially, I see Badu delivering on that vision. You've taken the international route. You're just coming up on 150 million members here, which is incredible. Why the international route? How many of those members are now non-USA, non-UK?
Well, the majority. We started in Spain, and people started inviting their friends, which means if you were to look at how Badu grew, you would essentially see a spiral out from Spain into the rest of Southern Europe, then crossing over to Latin America because of the obvious linguistic and cultural ties with Spain and Portugal. And then it starts to spread north in Latin America. So the bulk of that 150 million is actually outside of Anglo markets. So the UK and the US are now among our fastest growing as the product has now started to hit those two countries.
Plenty of Fish had a similar growth trajectory. They started off in Canada and they owned the Canadian market. And then Marcus had the option of USA, UK, where should he head? And he chose UK because he knew he could get his arms around it a little bit more easily, and it was a very price-sensitive market. And he did, he got his arms around it, and then progressed to the USA. It's intriguing the strategy you've taken with Badu. Spanish speakers as a population, there's over 300 million Spanish speakers, I believe, on the planet. Is that right? I mean, that's... then there's Chinese, over 1 billion, English, very high
Also
on the list.
popular in the Middle East, actually, as well. And there you have over 300 million, I think, Arabic speakers. Um, I think what we've seen as well is that another place where we're very different from traditional dating sites is that the core of Badoo is free. We do have a freemium model, and it's helped us reach over 150 million run rate. So we're quite lucky to have had the success that we've had. I think one of the differences, though, is that because we're free, it lends itself to virality. It lends itself to tackling big populations. So the example you give with Plenty of Fish may have made quite a bit of sense for Plenty of Fish. In our case, the U.S., if I had to rank kind of markets in terms of where we'd like to go next and where we'd like to see the greatest growth, the U.S. would come ahead of the U.K. for us.
That's 150 million pounds, not dollars, right?
Dollars. That's dollars.
Oh, it is dollars. Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay. How predominant is the mobile Badoo in those numbers?
So we started on the web, so that's still the bulk of our members are on the web. We see an increasing number of dual platform users, and what's growing very, very fast is new registrations coming on mobile. So, for example, in the U.S., over 50% of our registrations are happening on mobile right now.
Wow.
For us, we've just like I think many other companies have really started to shift. In fact, really have now shifted away from being a company that innovates first for the web and then tries to almost put that onto a mobile. Now we look at mobile first and then the web.
And how does that trajectory change geographically? Is it the USA that's 50%? Are you seeing other demographics that are even stronger for the mobile adoption?
Well, the US is the strongest in terms of new registrations on mobile. I think that makes sense, though, because since we only really started to enter the US recently, that somewhat maps to how our own, in our own lives, how we become more and more dependent on mobile. So if we were entering, potentially France today, and we were just hitting France, I suspect we would likewise see very strong numbers in terms of smartphone adoption. Because we've been present in France for longer, while we're seeing a very fast curve in terms of an upward curve in terms of mobile adoption, we're still having web because we have people that have been on it before or that are inviting people that likewise are only on web. And of course, once you then go, depending on economic factors, right? If you go in parts of the world where perhaps smartphone penetration isn't as high, the primary source of registrations is still going to be web in certain parts of the world. So, for example, Latin America.
Gotcha. What would you say the primary drivers of the mobile platform seeing such incredible growth in the USA? Say also Match.com, a lot of the top mobile dating sites with good apps are seeing similar, but not quite as strong numbers. Badoo, of course, has an incredible app, an iPhone app. You've got a 4.5-star rating with over 1,000 reviews on iTunes, which is just phenomenal. Is that the secret sauce? Is it just you've got a really good app that people love, or how are you getting the word out in these new markets?
Well, I think if it was just that, gosh, that would make all of our lives really easy. I think the fact that we were growing and have been growing so strongly well before even smartphones really became something ubiquitous in sort of Western Europe and the US would point to other factors at work. I think the viral element, again, coming back to the fact that we're free, I think helps. I think the actual model, like I said, and it's an easy thing to say, but I think it can be underestimated. The fact that we really aren't prescriptive in terms of how you interact with the site, what we tell you to do on the site, and the kind of people you can meet on the site. And while that may make it difficult for people sometimes to understand what Badoo is, because people so quickly want to say, oh, it's a dating site, I think ultimately our users understand that flexibility and make use of it, and that's why it ends up spreading, is because it works for people.
There's nothing better than actually working, right? I mean, people rave about it because they're meeting people. Now, yes, it's free, but you're making 150 million a year. So what's the split? Let's get to the nitty gritty here.
So
What was the split between mobile money and online revenue generation?
well, we wouldn't break revenues down in terms of different platforms and so forth, but I think the first thing that's worth stating, because it sometimes for some people it's counterintuitive, is that we're not making money from advertising. We don't do advertising on the site currently. It's a freemium model, and we do it based on there's essentially two primary areas. One is subscriptions, which gives you increased functionality, and the other is micropayments. So, for example, a feature that we've had for a while now is something we call Spotlight, which allows you, if you're in a city where a lot of people are on Badoo, it's entirely possible that within 100, 200 meters of you, there could be tons of people on Badoo, which pushes you off of the first page of results. And if you really want to get noticed, you might do a small micropayment that jumps you up into the sponsored slot at the top of the app or on the website. And that shows you, that means you're going to get tons of visibility, tons of messages. It's something that people find quite addictive.
How about virtual gifting?
We have it on the site, yeah, as well.
Has that been popular?
People use it. It's an area where we haven't invested as much, perhaps in other areas. It's there, and it's another feature that we have and contributes to the revenue.
Have you seen much behaviour with people actually gifting themselves to make themselves seem more popular?
Not so much that. I think the thing that I've found very funny is seeing the difference in gender behaviors in gifting. So perhaps unsurprisingly, in terms of gender stereotypes, guys do not tend to be the most creative gift givers.
Yeah.
They are, the heart, the flowers. Yeah, great. You see a lot more diversity if women are giving gifts than if men are giving gifts. Those are the kinds of things that I find quite amusing in terms of the behaviors.
What do women respond to?
In terms of, well, there's all kinds of it. I think the dating sites in particular have done a great job of sort of giving people tips on how to get women to respond and so forth. Again, it depends on what you're on the site for and what the person you're contacting is on the site for and how they're going to respond. But I think a sort of almost universal truth nowadays, and that I imagine anyone else that interacts with dating sites is going to corroborate, is the fact that just starting off a message with hey or hi or hey sexy, probably not the best way to get a response in most cases.
So mobile is very important for Badoo, but can you actually see a day when mobile usage is going to exceed worldwide online usage for Badoo?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the idea that you would have Badoo in your pocket, and that as you're going throughout your day, again, depending on the reasons why you'd want to meet someone or just chat with someone, the fact that it's much more spontaneous, it's much more casual, flexible, all of which I think are values that generally correspond to what Badoo's been built on, even back in the day when it was only web. We always wanted it to be something very casual and very flexible. And I think mobile complements that really well. So we see, as I was saying before, we see what we actually see is more engagement if you're on mobile than if you're on the web. So it happens in shorter bursts, meaning you'll come on and you'll play with it for a few minutes, and then you may go off to your meeting or whatever it might be, but then you come back, and you come back again and again and again on the same day. Versus if you're on the web, you're more likely to have a single session or a couple of sessions in the day that are longer.
And how are conversions different?
You do see a difference in terms as well, I think, of payment, in that, again, mobile users, perhaps because of greater activity, are more likely to convert to paying users at some point.
And Android versus iPhone?
I think it's still early days to be able to compare in great depth, in part because it depends. I can think of some things that just aren't available today on Android, for example, subscription billing. So, if you start talking about monetization, you're going to see differences there that I think are more of a question of time than a difference that corresponds to, some longer term fundamental platform difference or the type of users you have.
And are there any other ways that you've seen mobile users behave very differently from online users around the world?
Sorry, that we see.
Are there any other unusual behaviors that you've seen with the way people will behave on the mobile phone versus online? Actually, one area would be location-based services. How have you incorporated LBS?
Well, we have a feature when you come onto the app. We have people nearby where you can see everyone who's near you now. I think it's a balance, because on one hand, I think it's great to be able to show people who are near you. It keeps the site casual. It means you can interact with people. Already you have at least one thing in common with them, and that you know they're in the same area. It can be a conversation starter. At the same time, we've built in lots of different controls for people. So you can choose to not show your distance. You can choose to not show if you're online. And I think those kinds of things are important if you're designing any kind of service that has location built in. At the very least, as a woman, those kinds of features would be important to me. So we have location, I think, is important, because depending, again, if I'm on the site to date rather than just to chat or practice a language with someone in another country, if I'm on the site to date, I probably want to date someone who's near me versus someone, who's often in another country or even another county. At the same time, at the end of the day, I'm going to care a lot more about whether a guy appeals to me and is a mile away versus if he's 200 meters away. In terms of, and so I think distance is a contributor and a signal. I don't think it's a deciding factor for how interactions happen on Badoo.
So you think women are really warming up to the idea of sharing their location?
I think it really depends. I think if you'd asked that question 10 years ago, I think the response would have been very, very different. There was Google Latitude, then there was Foursquare. The idea of checking into places and showing your location, I think there has been a shift amongst a lot of people. And I think I don't know if I would go so far as to say the entire population is so excited to show where they are every single second of the day. Then again, I wouldn't have also guessed that the entire population would be so excited about sharing every moment that they eat a cookie or every single thing that happens online. And it's contributed to the largest social network in the world. So what do I know? But I do think that if you provide the right controls and allow people to experience a site regardless of whether they're showing their distance, then you really can start to make people feel comfortable with that. But again, giving them the flexibility to decide whether or not they want to use that. And I think that's really important.
So Badoo is moving into a new stage of growth. In the past, the Badoo has grown really entirely, from what I understand, without any marketing budget. But now, advertising is happening for the very first time, from what I hear.
Yeah, I think when Badoo first kicked off, it happened in a time where first of all, it happened when there were just a lot of social networks and everyone was inviting everyone to everything. And I think people become more discerning, and rightfully so, about who they want to invite their friends to, what they want to invite them to. And so I think that only trying to rely on those kinds of mechanisms, ultimately, at some point, that's going to stop. It still absolutely works for us. Our growth is still primarily viral, and we're still seeing, of the 125,000 a day, or well over that we get each day, that's still happening basically by word of mouth. But when you start to look at new geographies and places where there may be a lot of similar sites, or they may not have heard of you at all, and again, if you're sitting there and you're defining an entirely new space, it's part dating, it's part chat, it's part social discovery. How are you going to go in and get the word out if you're trying to rely on word of mouth and there is no word of mouth at the moment? So I think we have to look at using some traditional marketing as well to start to explain to people what Badoo is and how they can use it.
So it's a seeding strategy then, basically to prime the pumps to get an initial audience.
I think so. I don't think we view ourselves, again, compared to a lot of traditional dating sites, where I think a lot of acquisition comes through TV advertising and other kinds of advertising. I wouldn't see us in the long term going down that route. We are a freemium site, so the amount that you would want to spend on marketing is going to be very different from, say, a traditional dating site. And likewise, I think we'd much rather focus on the product and on the kind of word of mouth and buzz elements than putting a lot of focus onto the traditional marketing side.
Great. Jessica Powell, you're the CMO of Badoo.com. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.